The Halloween That Almost Wasn't was a one-off TV special which aired on ABC on Halloween night 1979. And quite honestly, I don't think anyone expected this 25-minute long kids horror comedy special to end up having quite the legacy that it accumulated in the 17 years it remained on the air. Yes, you heard me right, this special was shown every Halloween somewhere on US television between 1979 and 1996. And having watched it for the first time this year, it's absolutely clear to see why. The show premiered in '79 and then was repeated on ABC on Halloween night 1980, 1981 and 1982 before being moved over to the Disney Channel, where it sat in the listings in a relatively prime-time slot from 1983 until its final broadcast in 1996. But it doesn't end there. In 1992, the special was released on VHS under the title The Night Dracula Saved the World, which, if you've ever seen this special, you'll realise what a joke of a title that actually is. But the VHS release allowed the special to live on significantly longer than its final transmission, and helped cement the special as a firm classic amongst anyone who's seen it. The plot of this movie is paper thin, but it's the execution here that really makes this special something you absolutely must watch this Halloween. So, the film opens in Transylvania. Despite the preconceptions, it's basically America but with more Gothic castles and architecture. We slowly track through a misty and smoky yard as we're introduced to Dracula's castle mansion thingy. And right away the film hits you with a sense of immense grandness that really won't be repeated again. But for an opener, it's a great and totally atmosphere-filled setting. Inside the castle, Dracula has just awoken and is getting excited in expectation for Halloween night, which is only one day away. His servant Igor has prepared the mansion and is settling in for an evening of B-movies and popcorn when a Transylvania news bulletin interrupts the monster marathon with news that Dracula has called a meeting of all the archetypical monsters and ghouls due to rumours swirling that this may in fact be the final Halloween ever. Both Drac and Igor are shocked as neither of them have said anything of the sort. And Dracula's particularly outraged as he's considered the king of the monsters and has absolutely no intentions of cancelling Halloween in any way, shape or form. So he tells Igor to prepare the mansion for unexpected arrivals, and then he calls a meeting of the monsters to get to the bottom of where the rumours have started and also to plan out the monsters' roles in this year's Halloween festivities. Introduced is Warren the Wolfman, a playful rib on Warren Zevon's 1978 song Werewolves of London, Frankenstein's creature, Zobor the zombie, the mummy, and finally Winnie the Witch, who's seriously pissed off that she's been summoned to Dracula's castle at such an unreasonable hour as she was trying to sleep. Drac gives all the monsters a big dressing down. He really doesn't mince his words with how disappointed he is with the monsters over the last few years. He feels they've gotten lazy or that they've sold out their image in favour of advertising dollars or serial mascot promotionals and such. He tells them that they've desperately got to up their game or they'll be fired. At which point Winnie fires up, telling Dracula that she has absolutely no interest in doing that because she wants to quit anyway. Winnie is tired of being a witch. She's upset that she has stereotypes imposed on her just for the way she looks, and she has nothing but disdain for the idea that she has societally imposed constructs on how she should behave forced upon her. She wants to make herself pretty, she wants to go disco dancing, and most importantly, she wants to be loved. Dracula scoffs at the idea of her quitting because without Winnie, Halloween literally can't happen. You see, in this world, Winnie is critical to the magic of Halloween being activated, as she has to fly over the moon at midnight on Halloween night in order to ensure not only that Halloween can be guaranteed to happen for the following year, but also to ensure that All Hallows Day can take place on November the 1st. Basically, no moon flight, no All Hallows Day, and no All Hallows Day means no Halloween next year, or even ever again for that matter. Winnie doesn't care though. She's had enough of the lifestyle and presents Dracula with an ultimatum in the form of a list of demands, which includes joint leadership of the rest of the monsters during the Halloween celebrations, shared ownership of all merchandising for Halloween, which is currently majoritively Dracula based, And once a year, Dracula has to take her disco dancing. Dracula, utterly insulted by the demands, refuses, so Winnie tries to leave. The monsters chase her a bit in a Scooby-Doo style before she manages to escape. Dracula gives chase through the night sky via his bat form, but after begging Winnie to reconsider, he ultimately has to turn back due to the imminent sunrise. But he vows to get her one way or another before it's too late. The next night, Dracula mobilises the monsters with a foolproof plan. Step 1. Storm Winnie's castle. Step 2. Seize Winnie and hold her steady. Step 3. Dracula will hypnotise her into flying over the moon, thus buying everyone another 12 months to reconsider things. But Winnie is a very smart and very calculating witch, and within minutes of the monsters storming the castle, a battle of wits breaks out between the clever witch and the not-so-clever gang of monsters. Interspersed through all of this, we also spend some time with two kids and their parents in the suburbs of Transylvania as they prepare for Halloween night. They do so by getting their costumes ready and by learning about Halloween as a tradition and its history, while they also get updates on the current Halloween situation from the news. Both plot lines eventually cross over into what was actually quite a surprising and touching ending that gave this old-time horror fan a fair little lump in his throat. And by the time of the end credits, I understood how this thing could have remained on the air for over 15 years. The story isn't really anything impressive. In fact, if I'm being honest, it's held together with chewing gum and strained shoestrings at the best of times. But what is impressive about this script is just how wonderfully funny and well written the characters are in this. I mean, the performances definitely really help to bring this script to life, but there are so many multi-level jokes in this thing that it really embodies the family movie nearly perfectly. There are slapstick jokes and stupid humour for the kids, but there's also Marx Brother-esque witticisms and gags about adult problems for mum and dad. Or me, if you're me. And they contrast this humour with some genuinely touching moments, again, particularly towards the end, as I mentioned earlier. And the fact that these monsters are humanised so much and that they're given human problems to deal with is a genuinely refreshing and unique take on the old horror monster classics. So strong are the characters' identities and the performances the cast give to bring these creatures to life that I really didn't care that the pacing was all over the place, that the 3-act structure was pretty much thrown out the window, or that the ending, while definitely touching and charming, was total and utter malarkey. It didn't matter. The characters were so entertaining to hang with for 25 minutes that it kind of overrode any kind of ill will I could have had about those kinds of expectations. To that end, the cast are all utterly watchable and simply superb. Mariette Hartley as Winnie the Witch is fantastic, an absolute show stealer from start to finish. She works a really wide range on the emotional spectrum here and is just a delight to watch. Judd Hirsch, in just this one brief appearance, may have ended up on my top 10 Draculas of all time. He's snarky, funny, he plays desperate well, he plays just the right tone of stupid here, which plays off wonderfully with his servant Igor. Speaking of which, Igor was also surprisingly enjoyable as a sidekick to the Count. He's the pinky to Dracula's brain, and again, he's just the right side of thick to come across as likeable. I thought their relationship was genuinely charming throughout this. In fact, the only issue with having 3 super well written and performed characters who have a decent chunk of the script is that it means the other monsters don't really get quite as strong a spotlight to shine in. John Schluck's interpretation of the Frankenstein's monster is definitely geared more towards being better received by the kids than the adults, and he definitely shows promise, but is maybe just slightly less impressive than the big 3. As for the mummy, the wolfman and the zombie, they might as well not be in this. They maybe get 1 visual gag each, but otherwise they're here for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only. To make up the numbers so Dracula has the appearance of henchmen, and because if they weren't in this, pedants would kick off about why there wasn't true monster representation. And at worst, kids might kick off that their favourite monster wasn't in this. They probably could have done more with the outcast monsters, but I suppose given the time constraints and the fact at least 2 of them are supposed to be extremely limited or unable to speak, it was pretty much unavoidable that there'd be some limitations. The script here was written by Coleman Jacoby. He has 17 writing credits and won 3 Primetime Emmys in his time as a writer. These were all pretty much for one-off TV specials, though his best-known work, or at least his largest contribution to television, is probably that he wrote 42 episodes of The Phil Silvers Show. Silvers quite famously played Sergeant Bilko in the show of the same name. This would be his last writing credit, as it would appear that he moved on to other ventures after 79 and unfortunately passed away in 2010 at the age of 95. The man could clearly write comedy and seemed to be a dab hand at character building, and I think if he could have retired on anything, then this credit was a definite high. The direction of this was handled by Bruce Bilson, an old guard from TV's Silver Age. There's no point mincing my words here, he has 116 directing credits, pretty much all for TV. If you watch television in the 60s and 70s, you're pretty much guaranteed to have seen at least one thing he directed, statistically speaking. To throw a few out there, Bewitched, Bonanza, Hogan's Heroes, MASH, The Mary Tyler Moore Show and Sanford & Son, amongst a frankly ludicrous CV. He was last seen in 2011 in a documentary about television and cinema's Silver Age, and apparently he's still alive and kicking, albeit retired since 2007. It kind of pains me to say this, but the Direction and Cine, while not bad, is definitely a bit stiff. I mean, it shouldn't really be surprising. It's directed by a guy who really cut his teeth in 60s television, where sound stages and single set-based productions were a big thing. But it's really clear that Bilson's directional style, at this point at least, hadn't moved on much from his Gidget days. While the establishing shots at the beginning of the special do have a very distinct quality, and some of the CSO shots of Winnie flying a broom definitely shake up the traditional formula, once you get past that intro section, it quickly establishes itself almost like a theatre production that just so happens to also be being filmed. I mean, like I say, it's not awful, and there is maybe a small number of shots that do look quite interesting or unique. It just looks a bit dated for the 70s. Which ironically meant that it looked a little bit like one of the 60s revival shows that was produced in the 90s, which in itself probably helped to extend its lease of life when the 90s reruns rolled around. Equally, I have to say the soundtrack has one or two moments. The use of toccata in D minor in the introduction sequence is really well used, and there's a wonderful minimalist synth track towards the end with Winnie. But the rest of the score? It's buried really low down in the mix over the vocals, to the point that it's almost unnoticeable all the way through. From what I can hear, it's mainly synthesized pieces, but usually looped tracks that just run for as long as they need to. Which is a bit of a shame, as I think maybe something a touch more orchestral to keep the momentum of the intro's vibe going would have probably gone a long way to really punctuate the comedy or heartfelt moments a bit more. Other than the VHS release in 1992 and a strange, clearly bootleg DVD release available on Amazon's UK storefront that for some reason is currently marked up with a frankly extortionate price, this has never had an official release outside of the States. But then despite the fact that this was airing well into the 90s, it seems to me like this special has largely been forgotten. Which I personally think is a real shame. Yes, it's a bit creaky, yes, it doesn't conform to the guidelines of traditional film direction or scripting, but in all honesty, it's a 25-minute kids movie written for a clearly young child audience, but with some more adult-oriented comedy designed to make parents chuckle with gags that fly over the heads of the kids on the down low. And when I say adult, I don't mean rude or mature, just jokes that only grown-ups would really get. It's not perfect by any stretch, but its characters are so charming and the whole thing whizzes by so quickly that it doesn't overstay its welcome at all. I kinda love this one. I think it'd pair up fantastically with a Munsters or Addams Family marathon. Witch's Night Out would probably also go quite well with this. Or you could maybe even use it as a gateway to get your kids into the Universal Monster movies. It's quite diverse in its application, but from my perspective, whether you watch it on its own or as part of a movie night, I'm sure you'll get the same charming buzz out of it that I did.